At twice the lunar orbit, the Hontai flagship of the invasion sat there above the planet Earth, menacingly as it waited for the single shuttle to raise from the surface of the planet and come into the bay. When it entered the bay, the ambassador simply watched on the monitors as they saw three bipedal somethings walk through. Though he had been in conflict with these humans for over a solar year, which was 3 human years, he was just confused at the look at them. No tentacles, no claws, or anything. She had seen some of the remains of humans, most of which were disturbing to look at. And of course, that was mainly due to the fact that they were mostly dismembered parts. They never got a complete human off the battlefield, which was odd. They knew the humans, even though severely outgunned, outflanked, outmaneuvered, and could not bring their ships up to any reasonable speed, continued to fight on, and if they got close enough, would detonate their own drives in order to take down even a single freighter. Not even a frigate. Maybe a corvette, but they would use themselves as their own guided munitions, but that's if they even got close. The Hontai ambassador still watched as these 3 personnel seemingly walked on 2 legs flawlessly. This was strange. Only a few other species walked on 2 legs, bipedal if you will, and simply moved, but most of them were hunched over, and many times, if they were defeated, would come in on all 4 limbs, but not these humans. They all wore a strange type of garment, all very similarly designed. However, in one case it was blue, another it was brown, and the other one was black? But that one had no ornaments on it at all. It was simply a solid black, several different layers of material on it. Even one that seemed to hang down from this human's neck. Every time she thought about the name, her blood boiled at the idea that the humans had not just surrendered after the first engagement, knowing that they were completely outgunned, but instead had insisted on fighting all the way from their 7th planet all the way to their 3rd. They did not stop. More and more ships would come in and simply get torn to pieces by the Hontai fire. They didn't stand a chance. And the ambassador, just before the humans reached the conference room, sat higher in her chair. The elevated chair seemed as though it was going to be a fitting place, as she would basically be empress of these colonies and their home planet. Though the species had been difficult to tame, it would not be more than a few words to be spoken, and they would simply surrender themselves to the Empire itself. The Imperium knew that this was the way that they expanded. They would simply blitzkrieg into an area, take apart the space forces, and then everyone would surrender, knowing that they could not fight back against the superior force that was orbiting their planet. And with that, she watched as all 3 walked in. All 3 stood, not seated. They didn't drop to their knees. They did not lower their heads. They simply stood there and stared at her. And this made her tendrils shiver in hate. She tried to hide this, but it was very obvious that she was very angry. The center human simply spoke. "Hello. My name's Admiral Johnson. We're here to work out a peace treaty." "A peace treaty?" she laughed. The humans looked confused at this, as they had no idea what she was saying. With that, she simply motioned, and simple translators were brought out. They held each one to their ear as they were motioned to do so by the orderly, and as they did, the ambassador spoke again. "You speak of peace treaty. We have destroyed your fleets, your satellites. We have totally destroyed your space stations as well, with the exception of one we have left as a token gesture that we can be merciful. And yet, You claim you want a treaty equal amounts, equal to us? How dare you say anything so damning to us? To me. With that, she even leaned forward a bit to try and push forward this strange meaning. She must have looked strange to the humans. This odd mix of octopus, turtle, and, well, housefly was sitting there looking at them. This bulbous creature with many tendrils, so skinny that didn't seem like they would be strong enough to lift up her fat ass out of that chair. They all seemed to have the same idea, as they sort of seemed to stifle laughter. She continues, "Why would we consider a peace treaty when we could simply wipe out your entire species? You have been beaten. Are you ready to surrender?" "No," the Admiral stated, very concisely. With that, she could see the look of defiance in all three of their eyes. With that, she raised a tendril, and many of her guards raised her weapon. "How about now?" He simply looked sideways, looked over at the one in the blue uniform. The one in the black suit was the only one that seemed to have fear in his eyes. And yet, the Admiral spoke. "We came up here as a sign of good faith, and you're going to shoot us? Yeah, try making everybody surrender then." It was at that point the emissary realized that she might have messed up just a little bit. Yet she waved another tendril, and the guards got closer, pressing their weapons into the sides of each of them, the blades at the end of their weapons beginning to cut through their strange cloth, and a little trickle of red blood started to come out. This was enough to make all the guards back away very, very quickly, as they feared the iron that was in the blood. It was toxic to them. They didn't even want to be close to risk breathing any of it in, as that was 100% lethal. Every time they faced off against a human, they needed some sort of encounter suit, but now, as an act of defiance against them, they were looking at them without any type of protection. This time, the ambassador saw what was going on, waved two other tendrils, and the guards backed away. "Now, listen close, human." That's Admiral. "Your species is human, and that's all the respect you will get from us. Understand that at any time we could fire our weapons down to your planets and make them uninhabitable. Your colonies off on the second and fourth planets could be wiped out in a matter of a single of your hours. Your colonies on different satellites around this tiny sector of space would be easy for us to destroy. Do you not care about those who live on there? They'll be fine." With that nonchalant saying, even the ambassador was put back a little bit. "Shall we start destroying more of them? Destroying the entire planets they're on?" With that, the ambassador started to chuckle a little bit, put his head in his hand just a little, and the one in the blue uniform looked over, put his hands on the Admiral's shoulder to get his attention. And with a quick look, the Admiral immediately came back to his senses, and with a very professional demeanor spoke. "Ambassador, I am willing to concede that your ships were more powerful than ours, in every sense of the meaning. Not only did they pack far more weapons, more destructive weapons, they were extremely difficult to damage, not to mention they were much faster than ours. We will concede this fact. However, there is one fact you refuse to concede, that we are not stupid enough to miss." "And that would be?" She screeched at him, enough that everyone pulled the translators away from their ears for a moment, and then brought them back. "The fact of the matter is, you want these planets, and you want humanity intact. Destroying these, either one, would be enough to not only get you demoted, but most likely get you killed in the eyes of your wonderful Imperium." With that, The ambassador suddenly showed a little bit of shock on its bulbous face. This was obvious to everyone, even the guards, who suddenly had shock on their faces. How could the humans figure this out, was all she could think. Without skipping a beat, the one in the black suit stepped forward. Ambassador, I would like you to understand one other additional matter when it comes to humanity. We may not have the best when it comes to ship technology. Well, we didn't, but we do now. How could you say such a desperate thing? The translator was having trouble saying her words, as it was mixed in with a bunch of curses that immediately did not translate, but left dead space in its wake. Ambassador, we've hacked your entire system. This ship actually belongs to us now. So we're offering you a peace treaty. The ambassador began to laugh, a strange mixture of metal ripping together, a strange bass drum hitting, and the twang of a guitar. It was actually painful for the humans to hear, to the point where they pulled the translator away and actually covered their ears with both hands, as laughter ripped through not only from the ambassador, but the guards as well, as they laughed at the idea that the ship was theirs. Oh, you don't believe me, Ambassador? Oh, well, why don't I prove my point? With that, he simply reached up to a small mechanical device on his wrist, touched the side, said, "You guys receiving, right?" And with a little squeak back, just a tiny little bit of a tick, small enough that the translator didn't even get it up, he simply said, "Vent the bastards." And with that, the door that was open on the room he was in slammed shut instantly, and then alarms began to go off around the entire ship. With that, the ambassador looked around. The guards were confused as well, and suddenly they could hear the slamming of every single bulkhead, every single hatch, every single door. Everything slammed open in the matter of less than a second. It was enough that the ship itself shuddered with the amount of material that was moving. From the outside, it could be seen as all the doors opened, all the cargo bays opened, and all the bodies drifted out into space, many of them still thrashing around like seemingly some sort of sea anemone as they reached desperately for any type of air that they could breathe, anything to grab a hold of. As the artificial gravity was gone as well, the air was strong enough that it just simply yanked them out into space, even as light as it was, but they had vented the entire ship that fast. "Shall we show you what's going on inside your ship, Ambassador?" With that, the one in the blue uniform pulled up his sleeve, exposing a small piece of machinery. It was so small that it couldn't be seen through the suit itself. He pressed a couple buttons and a holographic display went up. It showed the bridge and the bridge crew as they floated in space with 0G, as they reached around again, trying to desperately to reach the reserve canisters, anything that they could get to put air back into their lungs. And they were trying anything they could not to suffocate in the matter of 2 or 3 minutes. It was noted that the air inside the ship was incredibly dense in comparison to that on Earth. It was so much so that someone could actually take a breath and most likely hold their air for over 6 minutes without issue, at least for humans. For the Hyundai, this was not the case. The ambassador watched, and the guards watched, in absolute horror as the bridge crew slowly stopped moving, and eventually would only twitch ever so slightly. "This is what we can do, Ambassador. This ship is ours." With that, she looked down. "What do you want?" "Well, that's simple. We want you to get the fuck out of here and never return." With that, the ambassador's eyes got as wide as they possibly could, knowing that if she went back and said that she had lost not only control of their flagship, but had lost to a bunch of angry, hairless monkeys that weren't able to reach out and even scratch their vessels unless they blew them up, she would be executed, and so would everybody inside her staff. So it was a horrible catch-22 for her. She pondered as best as she could. I cannot do that. I cannot. My crew, what's left of them, will be destroyed, and they will execute me publicly and destroy my entire family line. This is a disgrace to us. You cannot do this to me. You cannot do this to me. You cannot... Bang! A shot rang out, and the Admiral was standing there holding his .45. Without skipping a beat, the other two reached into their clothing and immediately pulled out firearms. They looked to the guards, only wearing ceremonial gear and having ceremonial weapons that were only bladed at the end, no projectiles, and began to fire, the sounds of bullets echoing through the chambers. But there was no air inside, and the sounds were muffled. And in this space, with the exception of the three humans inside, no one could hear them scream. The Admiral was still looking around for any target still up. As his weapon smoked, he pointed back towards the ambassador, realizing that the shot had not totally breached through the very thick skull of her head. He walked up slowly, went next to her. The shot had bounced off the skull and left her extremely dazed. With her very thin tendrils, she wouldn't have the power to fight off a human, not if they were in hand-to-hand combat, as these small little bipeds were extremely strong. The muscle density was beyond anything she could have imagined. She looked on in fear, but she wouldn't fear any longer. He simply raised his pistol, put it to her face. You fucked with the wrong species, bitch. Bang, 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 click. He immediately dropped the magazine, pulled another one out from his waistband, and inserted another one with a click, and then putting the receiver forward. With that, he spun around, and he could see not only the man in the black suit, but the other man in the blue uniform look at him and go, "Temper, temper." Every human in the room found this funny, at least for the moment, until the Admiral yelled out, "All right, we have a fucking fleet to kill." With that, they called down and they were told they could repressurize the ship. They all immediately ran to the bridge, and within the 7 minutes it took, they had to push all sorts of bodies to the side. The gravity was eventually put back on, and they had to jump over different bodies as they made it to the bridge. As they did, they found one of these octo-squiddy turtle bastards leaned right over the entire console. It took all three of them to grab his bulbous being and drag it off to the side, where it landed with a splat. They then started hooking their devices up. They started pulling them out from their sleeves, from attached to their legs, and began attaching them to the consoles, plugging them in any way, shape, or form they could. The one in the black suit was definitely one who knew this the most, as he began to jerry-rig all sorts of connecting pieces. And as they did, they get messages on their strange wristbands, which turned out to look a lot like a smartwatch. Each time they would receive a message that the ground control now has control of the ship. This sector, that sector. It didn't matter if it was weapons, if it was the doors, if it was the medical facility. It didn't matter. They got each of the systems one by one. And by the time they realized that some ships were starting to move closer, the rest of the fleet had saw the bodies floating and were trying to figure out what was going on, but were not receiving any communications. The outside hatches were immediately shut, and then they finally got the weapons array started. And that would be the end of the advancing force, as the flagship's guns immediately turned. The safety systems were turned off and everything began to light up the sky in a huge fireworks display from hell. The Hyundai had no idea what was going on, and it was far too late to pull back as they were all around the flagship. The flagship was now under human control. And since they had taken it in one piece, not to mention they had made it a point to try and disable, not destroy, the enemy vessels that were outside the flagship, now they had their own armada. They had access to technology that jumped humanity ahead almost a full century. They were going to be able to create their own armada before the Hyundai even realized that this was a total loss on their side and send any type of ships. They would be ready. They would be waiting. And due to the fact that the Hyundai had come with murderous intent, humanity would now change once again, but this time it wouldn't be for a decade or two to be on a war footing. No, now humanity itself had a mission. It had a crusade. It had a common enemy, and this was the worst mistake the Hyundai or anyone else could do. The plans were already in motion before the shuttles even left humanity's home planet. They were ready to use all these resources to go on the offensive, because you all know the best defense is a good offense.